I stood on my parents' porch with 3 children behind me, a garbage bag at my feet, and I knocked on that door like I had 1,000 times before. My own mother's house. My own father's door. And they closed it. Right in front of my kids. My brother laughed. My sister gave me a lecture. And I stood there and I made myself one promise. Just 3 words. Watch what happens. This is what happened. My name is Coralie. And 18 months ago, I had what most people would have called a decent life. Not a perfect life. Not the kind you'd post about and get 1,000 comments telling you your goals. But decent. Stable. I had a house with a dishwasher that actually worked, a minivan with a cracked left taillight I kept meaning to fix, and 3 kids who were growing so fast it felt like if I blinked at the wrong moment I'd miss an entire year. Saren was 9, serious, cautious. Already the kind of kid who reads the instructions before opening a box. Kala was 6, loud, wild, convinced she could fly if she just believed hard enough. And Arlo was 4, still small enough to fall asleep in my arms, still young enough to think I could fix anything. I also had Caspian. We'd been married for 10 years. A decade. Long enough that I'd stopped remembering what I was like before him, which is something nobody warns you about. How slowly you can lose yourself inside a marriage without ever noticing it's happening. He wasn't a monster. That would have been easier. Monsters are obvious. Caspian was charming, inconsistent, and fundamentally allergic to accountability. He was the kind of man who never raised his voice but somehow always made you feel like whatever went wrong was quietly, definitively your fault. The cracks had been there for years. I'd just become an expert at patching them. I worked part-time as a medical records coordinator. Not glamorous, but steady. I handled the house, the kids' school schedules, the grocery lists, the pediatric appointments, the permission slips, the birthday parties, the nightmares at 2 a.m. Caspian handled his career, which he treated like a religion. Sales director at a logistics firm. Good salary. Long hours. Frequent travel. And somewhere inside all those business trips, he had found someone else. I found out the way a lot of women find out, not through some dramatic confrontation, but through an accidental text on a phone he left unlocked on the kitchen counter. 3 sentences. That was all it took. 3 sentences and 10 years evaporated in about 45 seconds. I won't describe what the next few weeks looked like. Some pain is too specific to share with strangers. What I'll tell you is that we tried, briefly, unsuccessfully, to hold it together. Caspian said the right things at first, the way he always said the right things. But something in me had shifted, and the words didn't land anymore. They just passed through me like wind through a screen door. By spring, I had filed for divorce. What I did not anticipate, what I genuinely, naively did not see coming, was what would happen when I told my family. I come from a close family. Or at least, I believed I did. My parents, Livette and Bowen, had been married for 36 years. They were the kind of parents who showed up to graduations and recitals, who called on birthdays without being reminded. My brother Landis was 32, unmarried, still living in the house he grew up in, half of which he used as a gaming setup. My sister Bryony was 28, newly married, convinced that her 18-month relationship had given her a PhD in what made marriages work or fail. I called my mother first, told her what had happened. What Caspian had done. That I was filing for divorce. That I didn't know yet what the custody arrangement would look like, but that I needed some time, some breathing room, just a few weeks to stabilize. Maybe I could bring the kids and stay in the guest room while things got sorted. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause that has a whole paragraph in it. Coralie, my mother said, "You know we don't have the space. I want you to understand something. My parents' house has 4 bedrooms. Landis occupied 1. The other 2 were empty. There was a finished basement with a pull-out couch and a television and a separate bathroom. I had slept in that basement every Thanksgiving for the past decade when holidays ran long. There was space. There was more than enough space. Mom, I said carefully, I have 3 kids. I just need a few weeks. You need to think about this more carefully, she said. Divorce is a serious step, Coralie. Caspian is a provider. These things happen in marriages. You work through them. He had cheated. I had found the proof. I had not misread the situation. And yet somehow I was being asked to reconsider. I drove over the next morning. Pulled into the driveway I'd pulled into 1,000 times. Walked up the porch steps I'd run up as a child. Knocked on the door of my own parents' house. My father answered. Bowen is not a cold man. Or at least, he never used to be. But he stood in the doorway and his face did something complicated when he saw me and the kids behind me. Like he'd been briefed. Like he already knew what he was going to say and had rehearsed it. Your mother and I talked, he said. We don't think it's a good idea you staying here. Dad. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. I have nowhere to go right now. The house. I don't know yet what's going to happen with the house. The lawyer says it could take months. You could go back, he said. Try again. Saren was standing right behind me. 9 years old. Completely silent. I felt her hand slip into mine and I held it so tight. I'm not going back, I said. I need help. I'm asking you for help. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked past me at the kids. Then he stepped back slightly and said, I'm sorry, Coralie. We just can't do it right now. And he started to close the door. Landis appeared behind him before it shut all the way. My brother. 32 years old. Living rent-free in our parents' house. And he had the nerve, the absolute nerve, to lean around our father's shoulder with this half-smile on his face and say, there literally is no space, Cor. You know how it is. He had an entire floor to himself. I stood on that porch and I didn't cry. I wanted to. The feeling was right there, pressing against the back of my throat. But Saren was holding my hand and Kala had pressed herself against my leg and Arlo had his arms around my waist from behind. Because at 4 years old, he could feel that something was wrong even if he didn't understand what, and I was not going to fall apart in front of them. Okay, I said. Just that. Okay. Then Bryony appeared. Of course she did. My little sister materialized in the hallway like she'd been waiting for her cue, arms crossed, head tilted in that particular way she had when she was about to say something she'd already decided was wise. Honestly, Coralie, she said, I think this whole thing is a little impulsive. Caspian isn't a bad person. People make mistakes. You have 3 kids to think about. Their stability matters more than your feelings right now. Their stability. As if I hadn't been the one maintaining every piece of their stability for the entirety of their lives. As if I hadn't been the one at every school pickup, every fever, every nightmare, every first day and last day and hard day in between. As if I wasn't the reason there was any stability at all. Thank you for your input, I said. My voice was very, very even. Bryony shrugged. Like I was being difficult. Like I was the problem here. I picked up the garbage bag at my feet. I buckled 3 kids into a minivan with a cracked tail light. And I drove away from the house I grew up in. We spent that first night in a motel 30 minutes outside of town. It cost more than I wanted it to cost, but it was clean and it had 2 beds, and the kids thought it was an adventure. Saren helped me get Arlo settled. Kala announced she was going to sleep in the middle because she was the important one. I left for the first time in what felt like weeks. Small, shaky reel. I lay awake that night after they were all asleep and I thought about what I had. Not what I'd lost. What I had. A part-time job I could probably make full-time if I asked. A decent work history. A lawyer who had taken my case on a payment plan. 3 children who were healthy and whole and currently sleeping in a pile like puppies. And a promise I'd made to myself on a porch. Watch what happens. I'm going to skip over the ugly middle part. Not because it wasn't real, but because this story isn't really about suffering. There was enough of that. There were weeks in a motel that stretched into a month. There was a period where I was eating crackers for dinner because I'd used the last of my cash on Arlo's new shoes because he'd had a growth spurt and couldn't fit into his old ones. There were nights I sat in the bathroom after the kids fell asleep and let myself feel the full weight of what had happened, and then I got up, washed my face, and went back to being their mother. What I want to tell you about is what I built instead. My supervisor at the medical records office, a woman named Terrell, sharp and no-nonsense and unexpectedly kind, noticed that I'd been coming in early and staying late. She asked me one afternoon straight up if I was in a hard situation. I told her yes. She didn't offer pity. She offered hours. Full-time with benefits. I took it before she finished the sentence. I found a 2-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that wasn't fancy but was safe, close to Saren and Kala's school, with a bus stop 2 blocks from Arlo's daycare. It was small. The kitchen had exactly one drawer that opened properly. The bathroom tiles were a shade of beige that had probably been fashionable in 1987. But it was ours. I hung curtains the first weekend we moved in. Kella picked them out, bright yellow, aggressively cheerful, and I put them up and stood back and thought, yes, okay, this is going to be alright. The divorce took 8 months. Caspian had a better lawyer initially, and he used it. Pushed for a custody arrangement that was, I'll be generous, optimistic about how present he intended to be. But here's the thing about fathers who haven't actually been doing the work. They don't have the receipts. I had 10 years of being the primary parent, documented by school records, medical records, daycare check-in logs. My attorney was thorough. The custody evaluation was not kind to Caspian's claimed involvement. I got primary physical custody. He got every other weekend and 2 weeks in the summer. He also owed me 8 months of retroactive child support that his new legal team tried very creatively to reduce. They did not succeed. My family found out about the settlement through the grapevine. Our town is not large, and news travels faster than it should. My mother called me. It was the first time she'd called since the night I told her about the divorce. "We're so relieved it worked out," she said, as if she'd been watching from a comfortable distance the entire time, as if she'd been in my corner all along. "Are you?" I said. "Coralie, you have to understand." "Mom," I said, "I do understand." I understood that night on the porch. Very clearly. A pause. "We were worried you were being hasty." I had 3 children and a garbage bag. I wasn't being hasty. I was asking for help. She shifted into the particular mode she had when she felt cornered. The sighing, the quiet suggestion that I was being oversensitive, that families go through hard periods, that we needed to move forward. I let her talk. I didn't argue. When she finished, I said that I needed some time and that I would be in touch. I haven't rushed that timeline. Bryony reached out about 4 months after the settlement, when I'd gotten the kids settled in the apartment and started to find something that resembled a rhythm. She sent a long message, paragraphs actually, about how she'd been reflecting and she hoped we could reconnect, and how she'd said some things that came out wrong and she hoped I understood where she'd been coming from. I read it twice. I thought about the porch. "I thought about your feelings right now," said with that particular tilt of her head. I wrote back something short and not unkind. I told her I appreciated the message. I told her I needed more time. I told her that when I was ready, I'd reach out. She has not stopped trying since then. Messages every few weeks, increasingly elaborate, increasingly aware that she miscalculated something. I read them. I take my time. Landis hasn't reached out at all, which is its own answer. My father sent a card at Christmas. It said "thinking of you" in his handwriting. I put it on the fridge for the kids because it was their grandfather's handwriting, and that's separate from everything else. 6 months after the settlement, Terrell recommended me for a department lead position. It came with a salary increase that made me sit down for a moment when I saw the number. Not because it was extraordinary. It wasn't, but because it was mine earned, documented, nobody's grace or exception. Just mine. I upgraded the apartment. Found a 3-bedroom in the same school district, slightly newer, bathroom tiles in a shade that had never been fashionable at any point in recorded history, but at least all the drawers opened. Kala got her own room and immediately painted one wall with chalkboard paint and covered it in illustrations of horses she couldn't actually draw but was very committed to. Saren, who had been quiet and watchful through all of it, came to me one evening while I was making dinner. Leaned against the counter. Watched me stir something for a moment. Then said, "Mom, I think we're going to be okay." She was 10 by then. "Yeah," I said. "I think so too." She went back to her homework. I kept stirring, and I thought about a porch and a garbage bag and 3 words I'd whispered to nobody. There's a specific kind of justice that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a dramatic confrontation or a moment where you get to see the exact expression on someone's face when they realize they were wrong. It's quieter than that. It builds in increments. It's a lease signed in your own name. It's a savings account that keeps growing. It's 3 kids who go to sleep in their own beds in a home that you created from nothing, and who wake up the next morning and ask for pancakes, and who have absolutely no idea how much it cost you to get here, which is exactly how you want it. Caspian moved in with the person he'd been seeing. That lasted about a year, from what I've heard. He's currently renting a one-bedroom on the east side of town. He takes the kids every other weekend, and to his credit, he does show up. I don't speak to him unless it's about the kids. We communicate by text. It's efficient. I have stopped expecting an apology from my parents or my siblings. Not because I've decided they don't owe me one, they do, but because I've learned something in the past 18 months that nobody told me before. Waiting for an apology is a form of staying. And I am not interested in staying anywhere I had to beg to be let in. Last month, Saren's school had a family showcase, one of those events where the kids present projects and parents walk around and look at display boards and drink bad coffee from a folding table. I went. Obviously I went. I always go. Saren's project was about resilience. She'd researched it for weeks. The science of it, the psychology, what makes some people recover and others stay buried. She'd made a display board. Hand-lettered title at the top. She'd done the whole thing herself. At the bottom, in smaller handwriting, she had written, "Resilient people don't wait to be rescued. They figure out the next step." She was standing next to it when I walked up, watching me read it with that careful, measured look she has. "I wrote that part myself," she said. "Not from a source." I looked at her for a moment. Daughter of mine. 10 years old. Already understanding things it took me 34 years to learn. "It's good," I said. She nodded, satisfied. "I know. I don't tell this story because I want you to feel sorry for me. I don't want your sympathy. I've got a working dishwasher and a department lead position and 3 kids who are wildly, loudly, specifically themselves, and I'm doing just fine. I tell it because I know there are women listening to this right now who are standing at some version of that door, who are holding the weight of kids and bags and shattered trust and asking for help from people who are supposed to love them. And the door is closing. And it feels like the end of something. It's not. It is, I promise you, the beginning. The people who closed that door on me are still living the same lives they were living 18 months ago. Same house. Same routines. Same everything. While I built something entirely new from a motel room and a garbage bag and 3 words whispered on a porch at night, there is no sweeter outcome than that. None. If someone ever told you there was no space for you, what did you do with that? Tell me in the comments. Because I believe this community understands something that took me far too long to learn. The people who say there's no room for you are usually just afraid of what you'll become once you find your own.